have a lower premium this year than they did last year with the same amount of coverage? Not so much. Lower copays and coinsurance? Again, not so much. Oh, I know, it must be bringing down the prices of the medications. Not really. So, when we look at the Fortune 500 list, the big three PBMs, Optum Rx, CVS Caremark, and Express Scripts, are all in the top 25. Now, we expect Optum Rx, because they're owned by United Healthcare, who makes a very nice profit, to be there, and CVS as well. But you've got to wonder, you know, where they got $68 billion. They did have investors to buy an insurance company, and it's the PBM that makes the money, which is why the consolidation has taken place. Express Scripts, you know, they do no research. They make no product. They don't even take control of a product. They just tell people where to send the products. And they take no liability for the formularies that they construct that we must follow, and yet they're number 25. The highest manufacturer on the Fortune 500 list who makes everything, Johnson & Johnson, is number 33. Now, granted, this isn't the profit, but the profit for Express Scripts, depending on how you calculate it, I'm not an MBA or economist, and I don't play one on television, but from what I've read, their profit should be a percentage of assets. And if that's the case, when you look at the numbers, their profit's about $7 to $8 billion a year. That's Express Scripts. They'd like to call it $3 or $4 billion a year, but that's still a healthy profit. So ultimately, even if we just take away the money aspect of it, the consequences of the rebate system and how the formularies are constructed, you know, you could in some way understand if it truly was saving the country money, if it was truly saving our patients money, we could understand if the formularies were based on the lowest list price, we could swallow that. But, you know, to have the doctor-patient relationship infringed upon specifically for the profits of the company, and again, Dr. McKnight, there is a difference between profits and profiteering. And I would submit that this is profiteering on our patients. So anyway, it infringes upon the doctor-patient relationship in so many ways, but the step therapy, non-medical switching, the exclusion of drugs. And if you think of some other unintended consequences, it truly incentivizes higher list prices. And then that does affect biosimilars. You know, one of the problems with biosimilars is the rebate wall. As you can remember, the formulary involves the list price, the discount, and the market share. And you know, almost by definition, biosimilars are going to have a lower list price. That's why they were, you know, we fast-tracked them through the FDA. And because they're new to the market, they have no market share. So where does their rebate bid come in? How does a biosimilar break through the rebate wall? And then, of course, it increases patient cost sharing. I'm going to tell you there is something that is coming out of HHS that may make it so that I don't even have to give this talk anymore. I'll talk about it in just a second. So who regulates? You say, with this kind of behavior, who regulates them? Well, the Federal Trade Commission. And as I stated earlier, one of the attorney advisors to the FTC felt that transparency for PBMs was a bad thing because it softened competition and raised prices. Softening competition would actually probably lower prices. But anyway, the Federal Trade Commission has not had much of an appetite in terms of antitrust decisions when it comes to PBMs. There are 5 new commissioners, and I actually have a date to meet with the new head of the FTC. You know, where that'll go, who knows. This proposed rebate rule, now this came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago. You know, CMS makes these proposed rules, and then they take comments, and then they come out with the rule. And this rule is very important. It takes away the safe harbor from the rebates that are paid to the PBMs. So they would be considered kickbacks. So that can no longer happen. And they've instituted they're proposing to institute 2 new safe harbors. One, so the rebates can go to the patient, and the other that would sort of create a flat fee for the PBMs so they couldn't charge on the list price of the drug. And that is something that should be bipartisan. Unfortunately, because it's coming out of the Trump administration, the Democrats have jumped all over it, and Nancy Pelosi's statement on it makes no sense whatsoever. This is just another excuse for pharmaceutical manufacturers to raise the price. It's talking points from the PBM. So I would, if you're part of any organization making comments, I would strongly suggest supporting this proposed rule. The final rule will be coming out probably shortly. And that may break up the entire rebate system. I was at a meeting in DC called Operationalizing a World Without Rebates. But again, the panelists were all people up there trying to figure out how they could make a buck on this new, on the new way. So, Department of Justice, Congress widened, and on the next slide I'll show you the See-Through Act, which basically would bring transparency to PBMs, which is a good thing. The states have been legislating step-through therapy, non-medical switching, a lot of transparency for PBMs. Unfortunately, it only controls the non-ERISA plans. ERISA are employer-based insurance, and the majority of us have insurance through our employers, so the state's legislation doesn't necessarily have control over that. I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker. HHS, the proposed rule, as you may know, next week the Senate Finance Committee is bringing the PBMs before them the same way they brought the manufacturers, the See-Through Act. This is a list of some states that are trying to enact PBM legislation this year. Right here in Texas, Oliverson from Cyprus has a bill out, 2233. And Medicaid. Ohio probably was the one that started. They realized that they were losing money in their Medicaid formulary. PBMs kept $225 million. West Virginia, in its first year, saved almost $40 million. Kentucky, it looks like it's going to be higher than $200 million. So if your state is in the red, have them look at the Medicaid PBMs. And this is my last slide on transparency. Steve Miller, who's the chief medical officer. The red italics are me. Okay, I just want to let you know that. We love transparency for our patients. They know exactly what they're going to pay when they go to the pharmacy counter. And I say, well, we just don't want them to know what we ultimately paid for the drug because their coinsurance is more than likely based on a much higher list price. They love transparency for their clients. They can come in, can audit the contracts. We just don't want them to know the profit we're making on the specialty rebated drugs because we don't pass back those reclassified fees to them. And finally, what we don't want is transparency for our competitors. With the way it's set up, they really have no competition. And I know you're not supposed to read the captions on this, but I can't help myself. Let's never forget the public's desire for transparency has to be balanced by our need for concealment. ATAP is an organization created by CSRO and the ACR. It is based, its only mission, it's a 501c3, is to educate patients, providers, regulators, legislators on PBMs. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Feldman. We have some questions from the audience. We can have them at the microphone, but also we have them, and a lot of upvoting on these. One that was very popular, why are we seeing more prior authorizations, even for something like prednisone?
The whole sort of reason behind the prior auths is delay. They figure if they don't have to pay for it right now, they can pay for it later. And there's only certain physicians that will continue to put in the appeals. And the more appeals you do, the better, because it costs them more money. But they just hope that we'll give up. That's essentially, prednisone is not a very expensive drug, and it's probably just built into their system. Yes?
Can you go to the microphone, Dave?
This is essentially a RICO Act. This is gangsterism, Mafia 101, what we're doing here.
Well,
and yet, our congressmen, which if you need help with some congressmen, I could get them to your door on a dime. And that's true. Jack and Artie will tell you that's true. But why haven't we proposed?
Because everything they're doing right now is legal. When they have been sued for lack of fiduciary responsibility, they claim our fiduciary responsibility is just to
the shareholder.
Yes, and they claim, you know, they want to pretend to be the saviors of the system with all of these discounts.
I know that. I'm not naive.
But they're just middlemen, and that's how they get out of it. They go, well, we're just a middleman. So the only way to really get at them is to take away the safe harbor from the kickbacks. And once that safe harbor is gone, then they can't take the kickbacks. And that's what that proposed rule does.
Another question that got a lot of upvotes, are peer-to-peer reviews and appeal letters a joke? Seems like most reviewers are not rheumatologists, don't even know about the drug they denied.
Right. So, and you may have heard, because other people who've talked about, you know, how to go about doing an appeal. I mean, one of the first things you want to ask and document in the chart is, you know, where did you do your training? And how long have you been in practice? Are you still in practice? And I just really want to take down all of this so it'll be in the record so that if something happens to my patient, we know the person we can go back to who made us use this drug or not allowed us to use that drug. And a lot of times that does help. But you know, you've got to get to that peer-to-peer.
Two questions. One, is there an official federal rule on the grandfathering? Because I'm still getting this when I'm doing PAs. And question number two, how much do PAs basically dampen the number of appeals? Do we know anything about the number of PAs that are appealed?
You know, the denials have been going up, particularly since states have been passing laws that they have 72 hours, they can't take 2 or 3 weeks to do it. So as soon as those laws get passed that it's 72 hours, it's almost like an immediate denial. When I was on the insurance committee for the ACR, I mean, that was one of the things that we saw was that the denials were coming quicker and quicker. And I don't have an exact number on what percentage are denied, but through the appeal process, a lot of times it does get overturned, but you've got to have the time and the motivation to do the appeals.
Are the grandfathers, is that a federal law? Or
no, no, that happened just for that one instance. There's no federal law about grandfathering in. They wouldn't be able to do the non-medical switching if there was.
I'm not sure there's a real short answer to this, but if anybody can give a short one, I think you can. What is the deal with colchicine? I should have put him under the ugly as well, but I didn't. No, it's those drugs that had never gotten their indication or the FDA approval for certain things. Another company can come in, essentially do a few studies, and then go for approval as a brand name, and then then they get exclusivity and they can raise the price to whatever they want. And that's a what do you want to call it? A glitch in the system.
Yeah, just thank you for the informative talk, and you know it helps us understand the drug pricing the way it is now. And a couple of things, we have to be thankful to Good RX for doing what they're doing, and I want to know how they operate, because the price of Plaquenil dropped to $12 for 180 tablets, and these prices fluctuate every day pretty much. I mean, I know Walgreens lowered the price for albuterol inhaler. It was $18 yesterday, today it's $28. I mean, that keeps fluctuating all the time. And thank God it's come down. So just as much as you see the increase in price, you can see the decrease in price at times. And I don't know what the reasons are for those. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, what would happen if we just lost the benefit or the work that PBMs do and got rid of them like we used to before PBMs got started? Is there a problem, and will there be a national emergency or something?
What would happen if we what?
If we got rid of PBMs, who would just...
Okay. So you may ask, well, why do we even have them? Yeah. Because it was a big job that the insurance companies didn't want to do. So they are necessary. I mean, they do perform a needed service, supposedly, in terms of adjudicating the claims. But what we need are formularies that are based on the lowest list price. And some say pharma doesn't want that because there would be a race to the bottom. I don't think there would be a race to the bottom. And actually, we're thinking about going to CMS with a demonstration project just for that.
Yeah, about the Good RX, do you know anything about how they're running this business? I mean, it's been out for a good 8 or 10 years now, and they've done a great job, and most everyone is using it. And what you said, it's true, many people want to go and buy it for cash and not report it to their PBMs and in spite of the threats.
One big company, Caterpillar, got rid of their PBM to do the negotiations and set up their formulary. This was about 15 years ago. And 2 years ago, I talked to their HR person. And in those 12 years, since they got rid of the PBM to do the negotiations and take the money for developing the formulary, Caterpillar had not raised their premiums on their employees $1. And I don't know many companies that can say that. And, you know, whether it's cause and effect about getting rid of the PBM, it did help. It did help save money. Put them in just a service flat fee position, transparent, and that's really where we should head.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Feldman. It was awesome. Thank you.